Welcome, everyone. It's really good to see all of you here today. And it's my absolute delight on behalf of Prajna to welcome Japleen Pasricha from Feminism in India to the Prajna Gender Talk series. Hi, Japleen. So, for those of you who are new to our webinar series, we meet on the second Saturday of every month, with the exception of a couple of months in the year. Our speakers are often academics, but have also been feminist activists, media professionals, lawyers, and writers who come in to speak about some aspect of gender very broadly defined. And we used to organize these sessions in person pre-pandemic, but have moved to a virtual format over the last year. And we especially love having someone like Japleen here to talk about what it means to start and run a feminist organization, because I think we also learn a lot and gain some great insights for ourselves. So the format is that Japleen is going to speak for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A to follow. If you have any questions while Japleen is speaking, please leave them in the chat box. And once she's done, feel free to unmute and have a conversation with her. And let me introduce Japleen and then hand over to her. So Japleen is the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Feminism in India, or FII, an award-winning digital intersectional feminist and bilingual media platform. She is also a TEDx speaker and was recognized as a young innovator in 2018 by the World Summit Awards. Japleen has master's and MPhil degrees in German studies and used to be a German language lecturer at Jawaharlal Nehru University and Amity University. Prior to starting FII, she worked with multiple women's rights NGOs in India like Breakthrough India and Point of View. She has also worked with Freedom House, a nonprofit based in the US, on a research report and advocacy campaign on gender based violence online. She has represented FII at various international platforms and was featured by the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in a book on women in tech for her work at FII. She has also been recognized by the Swedish Foreign Minister for her work on the gender gap in Wikipedia. Currently, Japleen oversees the strategic vision and growth at FII. So I'll hand over to Japleen now.
Good morning, everyone. Hi. Thank you so much, Shakti, for that introduction. And thank you, Dr. Swarna, for inviting me. I'm honored to be here today. So as Shakti mentioned, I like to keep sessions interactive because I feel it is just more casual and warm. So I would really like if anyone has any questions to just post them in the chat box, and I will take it them during the session, and then we can also obviously have a conversation after the session as well. But feel free to post any questions that you may have. And as Shakti correctly introduced, I'm the founder and CEO of Feminism in India, which is an online digital media platform. And today I'll be talking about my journey of founding this platform and like what all went behind it and what still goes behind it. So yeah. So, one thing that I am asked very frequently is, how did you find it? Like, what was the idea? Or like, what was the vision behind this platform? And people expect a very profound response from me, or they ask like, what was the moment that you wanted to start a platform like this? And everybody expects a very profound response, and unfortunately, I don't have one because I was a student. I was in my early 20s when I started this, and I was literally just getting bored sitting on my laptop, and I was like, let's do something. And at that time in early I think it was 2012, 13, social media was also comparatively new, and people were slowly getting on to social media, and Facebook at that time was the king of social media. Unfortunately now I think it's Instagram or TikTok maybe. And randomly one day I was getting bored and just frustrated with things around me. I started a Facebook page called Feminism in India, and actually it's inspired by a book called Feminism in India, which is an anthology edited by Maitri Chaudhary. So it was a absolutely random decision because as a 22, 23-year-old, that's what I felt like doing. So I started a page on Facebook called Feminism in India, and that's how it started. And I don't come from a gender studies background. That's another misconception that a lot of people have about me, is that I have studied women's studies or gender studies, which unfortunately again I haven't. So I have a very random story of how I got into this. As Shakti introduced, I have studied German studies. I speak fluent German, and I studied the history, culture, literature, etc., and also lived in Germany for some time. And I was well into my second master. I was doing my MPhil when I wasn't very happy with what I was doing. I still loved teaching German. I still loved teaching in general, and but it was just maybe for me not the right subject, which honestly is also very ironical because I was the model student. I topped all my classes, and just that teacher's pet kind of student who never bunks any class. So boring. So that was the story, and I was studying German, but and I had already done my BA in German studies and my MA in German studies. Now I was in my MPhil, so and going on to do my PhD. And during my MPhil was when this whole change of heart happened, and I was not very sure again of what I was doing, and I was like, but what is this gonna bring me, or how will this contribute to the society? And for me, that was always a question, like, whatever I am doing, how will it contribute to the society, or like contribute to my surroundings or my environment? And I was like, okay, teaching German to school and college kids, is that really what I want to do in my life? And again, like, this is the thoughts of a 22, 23-year old, so just please bear in mind that those were very raw, not very nuanced thoughts. And I think that's when, so I in between I started this Facebook page because I was very restless, I would say. And while I was still doing my MPhil research, I didn't want to just immediately leave something in between. It's also very difficult to leave something when you've been doing it for the past 7 years. uh, so I thought, okay, let me just also do this social media activism on the side and see where it goes. And that's how it went for more than a year. I was just, I would write on my own personal blog, and my blog would mostly have my own experiences of a young woman living in India, the kind of sexism and discrimination that any young woman today faces. Uh, and those were like some of those very, I would say, budding thoughts that like that budding time of what then was the stepping stone of what today is FII. I then, towards the end of my MPhil, I did decide, okay, this is not, I was very clear that, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. So I submitted my thesis, and then I bid goodbye to my supervisor and to my university. And I started looking for jobs in the women's sector because I did realize that I have absolutely no experience, no knowledge. I had neither have a degree in women's studies or gender studies, nor do I have any experience working with NGOs. And in general, like, there was this passion, but I didn't know what to do with the passion. Like, okay, I know that I want to do this, but how do I do this? I had no training, no knowledge, nothing. So I started looking for jobs, and I want to say that I got a lot of rejections because I was overqualified for a position, and also, uh, although I did have degrees in social sciences, those were irrelevant to what any NGO today would hire. Like, today, I wouldn't hire myself because I would say, okay, no, this degree is not useful. So, sorry, is there a disturbance? Okay. So yeah, I was trying to look for a job in the women's sector, and I'm based in Delhi, so I was trying to look for jobs there. And then fortunately, after about, I would say, about 6 to 7 months of facing rejections, I found my first job at Breakthrough India, which is a NGO based out of Delhi, works on violence against women. And there I started my journey of working in, gender rights and working towards women's issues and women's rights. And it was literally a breakthrough for me. So very apt, it's a coincidence. And then, sorry, could you go on mute, please? There's someone who's not on mute.
Could you please mute your mic while Japleen is speaking?
Thank you. And then while I was working at Breakthrough India in the digital team, which was also again very apt for me because that's where my social media activism experience came useful. And while I was working there, when I had a little more understanding of what exactly means to work in the gender rights sector, that's when I decided, okay, I want to do something with this page that I was, handling. So by this time, it was still a Facebook page, and I used to follow a lot of blogs on, not blogs, but like these feminist websites, which were mostly out of the US. So, for example, Bitch Media and Feministing and MS Magazine and Everyday Feminism. These are all US based feminist websites or feminist platforms. And they were also, I would say, like really useful for me while developing my own understanding of feminism and gender rights. Again, because I didn't come from that academic background. So for me, it was all self-learning and, educating myself on what feminism means because I've never studied it academically. And these websites came very useful for me because as a, any young person, the first thing that they would do is go to the internet. And the internet is that, becomes that space of education for them. Even though there are like a lot of other resources, and of course, there are books about so many books about feminism that one can buy and read, but young people, the tendency is definitely first to go to the internet and explore. And while I was doing this, I was also questioning myself, or in general, like, why don't we have such a thing back home in India? Because all of this, knowledge or content that I was consuming, these were, based on these Western feminist platforms. And so the idea then came from, here that I want to create a platform which is, for Indian feminists, by Indian feminists, and very much brings the local to the global as opposed to the opposite. Because 7 years back or 8 years back, like if I were to, say the internet was very much dominated by Western feminist discourse. And like there wasn't so much of, I would say, Indian representation, at least like that's how I felt back then. So then the idea became to create such a platform where, Indian women and Indian feminists could write about the issues. And again, like I was targeting my own demographic, which is young people between the age groups of 18 to 24. So, and like having said that, I'm also aware that there were feminist platforms in India before, which I at that time didn't know. So, for example, there's this platform called Feminist India, which is like this huge mailing list of all older feminists. And then there's obviously Manushi, which I think it's not active anymore. But that was one of the first feminist magazines, I think. And then there was this another platform called Ultraviolet, which was also by two Indian feminists, but I think they have also stopped. I don't think that they're active anymore. So there were some platforms that I used to look up to, but the need that I had wasn't somehow being met. And then that's how the idea came into being to start this platform. And because I was personally also blogging about my own, personal experiences of being a young woman in India, and like the kind of sexism, discrimination that one faces. So my immediate, this thing was to reach out to other young Indian feminist bloggers and ask them, hey, so I'm, creating this platform, and do you want to write about, like we were all blogging about whatever, gender issues and feminist issues on our own blogs. So I reached out to a couple of them and I said, hey, so I'm starting this platform, and would you rather, write here, so that like everything is on one platform. It's like a one-stop platform, or like a go-to place. And that's how we started. Like it was literally, I reached out to a friend, and he set up the website and all the technical bits of it. And we had a WordPress website, which is again free. And we like that's how we just started writing on the platform. So for me, like my journey has been very much, okay, I'm just going to do something and then I'll see what this means, or like what this is. Like it wasn't something that I was planning to start an NGO, or I was planning to become an entrepreneur. Like none of those were in my mind. It was more very impulsive, random decisions of a under 25 year old person, and just like, okay, let's see how this goes. Or I'm just passionate about this and I'm just going to do it, and we'll see whatever. So that's how FI actually functioned for the first, I would say, 3 years, because I was still figuring out my own understanding and my own passion. And, I also had a full-time job because FI wasn't something that was sustainable at that time. It was just a website. It was just like a passion project that I had. So I worked for a year at Breakthrough while also working on FI side by side. So in those early years, I was like a complete workaholic. So I would go to office, come back in the evening, and then start working on my laptop again for my own organization, like my project. And I would be very motivated to do that and have absolute no social life. and and yeah, so then the first year, we also started celebrating the 16 days of activism, which I know Prajna also does because I follow your campaign. uh, and So the first 16 days of activism is actually very special for me. So we celebrated our first 16 days campaign in 2014. That's when we launched the website. So we launched in August and the campaign started in November. And the idea was very simple, to publish survivor stories of women talking about it was basically like a Me Too, but not on Twitter, but on blogs. So, and of course, like long form stories and not tweets and social media posts. So again reached out to my network, and I told everybody that, hey, I'm doing this campaign for 16 days of activism. This is a UN campaign, etc., etc. And I would like that, all of us contribute to it and talk about our stories of like when we were sexually harassed, and, uh, throw the limelight on that it was not our fault. Whatever we did, it was not our fault. Like it's never the victim's fault. And I knew that for this campaign to, kick in, I have to start with my own story, because only then would people feel comfortable. So back in 2010, I was once traveling on the Delhi metro and I was molested on the metro. And that's an incident that I have really, it has like, it's just with me all the time, because I felt very ashamed of myself instead of like, what the perpetrator did, because I kept blaming myself that I didn't do anything. Like when I saw that this is what was happening to me, I didn't raise a voice and I didn't, create a scene. And I just quietly, I was ashamed of what was happening, and I quietly just stepped out of the metro instead of fighting back. So I was very angry with myself that I didn't fight back, and I didn't, create a scene in the metro and like, make an alarm, etc. So I started with that story, and I published my story of how I was molested in the Delhi metro then 4 years back, and how it impacted me, and like what are the kind of thoughts I had, and how now I'm realizing that it was not my fault. And even if I froze and I didn't do anything, that's a very common response of sexual violence survivors, that where they are unable to absorb and understand what exactly is happening. And if they haven't taken any action, they didn't report it, or they didn't do anything to the perpetrator, it's completely fine. It's completely okay to take that time to process what is happening to you and what happened with you. And I published my story, and slowly we started receiving more such stories of women talking about their experiences of sexual harassment and sexual violence. And we published one story each day for the 16 days of activism. And for me, the biggest and why this campaign is so special is there was this one young woman from Hyderabad, one young Muslim woman, and she told me that she really does, like, she's very proud of all the stories that she's reading, and she really does want to talk about her own experience, but she's not comfortable and she would rather not. So I was like, that's fine, it's completely okay if you don't want to. And then I didn't hear from her for a couple of days. And then towards the end, she again wrote back to me. She said, Japleen, I think because we were almost like at the 15th or 14th story, and we just had a couple of days to close the campaign. So she again wrote back to me and she said, Japleen, I think I actually do want to talk about my story. And so for me, that was a huge achievement, that during the initial days of the campaign, when this young woman was reading other people's stories, she felt more, earlier she was not very sure that she also wants to come out. But then reading other women's stories, she felt motivated and she felt brave to talk about her own story. And she talked about how, uh, even like, this, because there's this common narrative of, if you cover up, you won't get harassed, right? And she talked about how she was traveling in a bus and she was wearing a burqa, and even that didn't stop her from being sexually harassed in the local transport. And for me, that was the most powerful moment of the campaign, that there was this young woman who, like, reading all the stories gave her that courage and bravery to talk about her own story of sexual harassment. And later, we won the Ladli Media Award for this campaign, and that again was like a really, really special. I think first awards in general are like very special. So yeah, that was like one of the turning moments for me, that okay, this is something now, like something is happening with this platform, and now I need to, like, think about, okay, what I want to do. And I took another year to also keep understanding. I changed my jobs, I moved to Bombay for some time, and I worked at Point of View, which again is a women's rights organization that works on sexuality, disability, gender rights. And I was side by side again working on my own organization. So again, the same routine. I would come back home and start working on FI, etc. And then I think towards the end of 2015 is when I decided that, okay, this is something that I do want to do. And, you know, this, like, it's, I don't want just this to be some kind of a side project, but I would like to work on this full time. So I quit my job around 2000, early 2016, and I moved back to Delhi. And that's when I started working full time on FII. So for me, then I think the biggest question first was like, how to register, because again, I was, I think, just 25 or 26, and all these questions, all these things of admin work, they are very, very scary for a young person who's starting up, because you have absolutely no experience. You are a young woman and you have never led something. So I think for me, those were like some of the most scary questions to answer, of how would it be sustainable, where would you get the money from, and how would you pay your employees, and how would you um, yeah. So all of those questions were like very, very scary for me. Until then, if I had a voluntary team, so for the first 2 years, there were people who just joined us voluntarily, where they would, and all of those people that who joined me voluntarily were people who were not, like, I didn't know them in my personal life. They were not my friends, or they were not my acquaintances or people that I knew. They were people who started following FII and wrote into me saying, hey, I really like what you are doing and I would like to volunteer my time. So the first 2 years, 2.5 years, that's how we worked. And we had a volunteer team of 3 people. Um, but when I decided to go full time, I knew that questions around registration, funding, how to write grants, where to even search for uh, grants, etc. Like those were some, those were, I would say those was the most difficult time of my life till now. um, and so, wait, I'm just gonna take a quick break because I realized I have not shown you the website at all. So I'll first do that and now tell you what all we do today, and then again go back to what were the challenges that I faced at that time. So today we are a media organization, and we are a bilingual media organization. We publish in English and Hindi, and we also use multimedia. So apart from having an online publication where we write long form articles, we also have a video channel both for English and Hindi. We also create a lot of social media content, and we recently also started a podcast. So I'm just gonna quickly show some of this. Just 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Just can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, great, awesome. So this is the, okay. This is the English website. It's of course the biggest, this is our biggest, I would say, vertical, because given that we started as a English publication, so we have about 5,000 articles on the English website. So you can, and we publish across themes. So for us, we don't equate feminism with women's issues or women's rights solely, but for us it's broader than that, and it really is about social justice. So, and we have also tried to keep a mix of both pop culture-ish articles but also serious articles. So we have a culture section under which 1 second, yeah, we have a culture section under which we publish a bit lighter topics, so about poetry and book. We have a lot of book reviews, film reviews on fashion, food, pop culture, and travel. And then we have the intersectionality section, which is like the biggest section on our website, and it talks about various issues from body image to caste, conflict, disability, gender, indigenous and Adivasi rights, LGBTQIA, love, sex and sexuality, masculinity, privilege, violence, religion, etc. Then we have another big section which is on the society that we live in, and we talk about students' movements, about environment, family, law and policy, news, of course, politics, science and technology, sports. And one of my favorite sections is actually the history section, because I really, I really like reading about the women's history in India, especially. And I think that was one of the motivating points for me to start FII. So here we have this campaign called Indian Women History. The pictures that you see in red are part of that campaign. And this is one of our biggest editorial campaigns. We have, the idea of this campaign is to profile important Indian women from history about whom we have not read in our school textbooks because because of sexism and patriarchy. But we decided to start this campaign in 2017, and today we have profiled around 300 Indian women in history. There are, I can't even name all of them, but we have a huge database of about 250 to 300. I'm not sure of the number, but it's definitely more than 250 of Indian women in history that we have profiled. Then I would go to our social media content. So we are on all kinds of social media platforms, but Instagram is one of the most popular ones. People follow us most on Instagram. And we create a lot of social media content, which is like specifically for social media and not, it's not on the website. So a lot of poster-based series is what we do on social media. Then we also have a YouTube channel. So this is the English YouTube channel, and here we have a couple of series that I want to talk about. So one of First one is FI Explains, that talks about feminist explainers, and it breaks down words like tone policing, victim blaming, intersectional feminism, but also like how is feminism political, because that's a question that just somehow people keep asking, like, oh, why are you talking about politics? You know, feminism is about women's rights. And it just fails to, people just fail to understand that everything is political and women's rights are political. Then, of course, the Indian Women in History, as I talked about, that's one of our biggest campaigns. Uh, and we also focus on sexual health and reproductive health and menstrual health. So we have videos on that topic as well. And of course, culture stop, again, like focusing on film reviews and book reviews, and unpacking very stereotypical tropes, especially in Bollywood and Indian cinema. And as I said, we recently started a podcast. So this is the name of our podcast, Intersection Feminism Desi Style. It's available on all platforms. So wherever you listen to podcasts, please do check out. It's quite new. We just started it last year. So we are very new into podcasting. So I would love any feedback. And again, this is also kind of a feminist explainer kind of podcast. So it has 12 seasons. We have concluded the first season of the podcast, and we again looked at various issues on caste and disability and trans rights and what is modern love. We talked about love jihad as well. So please do check out the podcast. I'll now show you the Hindi website. So this is our Hindi website. It's a little smaller than the English website because we started it only 2 years back. So we don't have as many articles, but we have tried to model it, similarly to the English website, so that we cover the same topics. But we also cover, we focus on topics which are obviously relevant to the Northern Hindi, North India and the Hindi belt, the 8 or 9 states that come in the Hindi belt of the country. So this is our Hindi website, and again we have social media for all of our platforms, and again Instagram is like one of the most popular ones, and we also have a YouTube channel in Hindi. Where our strategy is mostly similar. We focus on feminist explainers the most because those are the most popular topics that like people really like watching our feminist explainers. But we also again have the Indian Women History section here as well, and the health section as well here. These are some of the topics that we feel that people have interest across languages. So we have kept the strategy similar to on both the publications. We don't yet have a Hindi podcast, but we do plan to have one in future. So this is just a brief overview of the website today. I'll just stop sharing the screen now. That's a great suggestion, Nisha. Thank you so much. I will forward this to my team. We have, because at this moment the campaign is focused on history, so we have covered politicians, but again, only historical women. And when we say historical, we mean that women, who from the at least from the past decade, because we want to focus at, like, we are also going by time period. So at this moment, we want to focus the people from the 20th century. But I will definitely look into this. So thank you so much for this suggestion. Okay, so as an introduction, I feel like I've talked a lot. So is there anything specific that anyone wants me to talk about, like, about funding or grants or like anything else? Because I feel like I can just go on, but I would rather like a more curated conversation on, anything specific that people would like me to talk about.
The thing that I'm always curious about, Japleen, as the founder of another organization, is the structural choices that people make. In your case, profit versus non-profit. society, trust, Section 25 company. I'm actually just curious because it would have never occurred to me obviously it didn't occur to me to set Prajna up as a for-profit company. So I was just curious about your thinking and your confidence about making that work.
So I think, as I said, like this was one of the most difficult decisions to take. And, coming from a background where like, even as a family background, like, I come from a very typical Punjabi business family, and I am the odd one out in my home. Nobody in my family, like no woman in my family is an entrepreneur. I think even no man in my family is an entrepreneur. They either are into business, like, family businesses, or they work at some MNC or some corporate. So I came with absolutely no experience whatsoever, and it was very, very scary. But I went through the pros and cons of both, of being a not-for-profit and a for-profit. And for me, at that time, the biggest con of being a not-for-profit was that we would have no source of funding if we go not-for-profit. And I'll explain you why. Because first of all, we are not like, even forget about the official registration. We don't function like an NGO. We are a media platform, and there are media platforms that are not-for-profit. Like, for example, The Wire is a not-for-profit media platform. But we don't have programs, and we don't work on the ground, or we don't have like, we don't basically function like how a NGO functions, right? And for us, then it became a problem that since we don't function like that, and most of our work is public, because as a media platform, and the media's job is to be the fourth pillar of democracy, we felt that if we became a not-for-profit, we would be really, it would be difficult for us to raise funding, because a lot of, first of all, there isn't, a huge Indian philanthropy sector in India. And I honestly, even now, after 7 years, I don't know of any Indian funding organizations. Like, if anyone else, please do, but absolutely no. So then, and from my experience, when I've worked with other organizations, I've seen that most of the funding comes from like foreign funding, for which you need FCRA, which we all know is the big monster in the Indian NGO sector. So for me, then the question was that, okay, we can't get Indian funding because there is no Indian funding, at least. And, how will we get FCRA when the kind of work we do is in direct contradiction of FCRA, like, so FCRA disallows you to do some kind of work. And also, we were very sure of that we want to be, critical of religion, society, and of the government, and we want to keep FI that kind of a platform. And for that to, to have that kind of a freedom, we felt that being a not-for-profit, and especially being in the shackles of FCRA, would not be, possible. And I talked to, so I did, as part of my research, I went to a lot of entrepreneurs and I talked to them, and I understood like what exactly, like what are my options being a media platform. And then the other side was also to understand that, okay, if we do register as a for-profit, do we have possible income models or business models that we can use? And we did see kind of a, hope there, that yes, there are business models that you can use to generate income. So, and again, like, it was a lot of back and forth, but then at the end that we decided that being a media platform, we want to have that kind of a freedom where we can talk about the issues, and we, don't have to keep mum because now we have FCRA and we can't criticize the government, because, a lot of NGOs unfortunately do have to do that. And like, I'm not, I'm not saying that, like, I don't want to criticize any NGO. I understand what are the limitations of when you have to be in the good books of the government to keep getting your licenses renewed. So I think for me, that was one of the most important point which led to the decision that, okay, being a not-for-profit wouldn't make sense for us, because then we would not be able to raise funding, and we would definitely not get foreign funding. So today we are registered as a for-profit company, but we call ourselves a social enterprise, which means that we are a social, business. First, which means that when we make profits, right now we are not making any profits, but when we do that, they would be reinvested in the organization. So at this moment, I see that someone else has also talked about financials. So at this moment, we do have grants because recently I got to know of an organization that's based in Bangalore called IPSMF. It's called India Public Spirited Media Foundation, which is a philanthropy organization that funds both for-profit and not-for-profit media organizations. So most of the digital media organizations today in India are actually funded by this organization, including the Wire, Scroll, Print, the News Minute, like most of the digital platforms that you would follow. And so that's one of our, that's where one of our funding comes from. But we also work on income generation and other business models to keep us sustainable. We are not fully sustainable right now, but that's a hope that we would be sustainable at some point in time. I hope that answered your question, Dr. Swarna. I see there are some more questions, so I'm just gonna take them up.
Would you like me to read them out, Japlin, or you're happy to just take them?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, sure. But if you could also read them out just for the sake of the recording, that would be...
Yeah, great. So the next question is from Aniket, also adding to Swarna's questions on structure. Can you also speak about your overall organization culture? Yeah, thank you, Aniket. So at this moment, we are a 11 member team. We are an all women team. So we have 9 full-time members and 2 part-time members. And we have a lot of people who also write for us in a freelance capacity, but I won't count them as employees because they work as freelancers. So now regarding the culture, this is again something that, as an organization, we are a very young team. I'm the oldest in my organization and I'm 31. So everybody is, between the age groups of 22 to 27. And I'm the mom, the oldie in the team. So it's, we have this, something that I'm really proud of is where when it comes to, developing organization cultures, it's something that we work as a team instead of, this coming from a very top-down approach. So including making our organization policies and also, the POSH policy and code of conduct and all of those things. It's something that we have worked together as a team. And is there anything specific you want to ask about culture? Because I'm not sure how to answer this. You can also unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think I would want to ask particularly about decision making, power structures. I mean, are there things you're experimenting? Because I mean, I work with the Gender Lab, and I think we constantly try to experiment with these things and question these things. So I mean, it would be great to learn from other organizations like yours if there is something that's working for you and you like to work with.
So as the employer and the boss of the organization, one thing that I can say, and which I have also received feedback from my team that works, is that I don't micromanage them at all. That's something that I experienced when I was working, and I really didn't like it. Micromanagement is something that I feel like is it's a very top-down approach, and secondly, it the employee who is working under you, they don't feel confident enough then to take their own decisions. So I'm a very, okay, do whatever you want, just let me know what you are doing, or like you run this past me, but you are the people who would be designing this. That's the kind of a relationship that I have with my team. And we also, the way that the organization structures is that it's not a vertical hierarchy, but it's horizontal. So people work within teams as opposed to reporting to, let's say, a senior. They report to each other, but there's no hierarchy. Like they don't report to, but they just work together and there's no hierarchy between them. So everybody can give feedback to the other person. So like the feedback process is something that we have really, inculcated in our team. So it's not that the feedback always comes from, from top to bottom, but feedback is horizontal. So I give feedback, but people give me feedback also. And we have also ensured that we do, formal reviews of all employees. And again, that's also a mutual two-way feedback process. So we have an HR at our organization, and that's something that when I decided to have to hire HR, that a lot of people were like, oh, but you are such a small organization. We were at that time we were just 5 people, and they said like, why do you need a HR? Because HR is usually like, some people don't hire HRs until they have like 20 people. And for me, that was very important to hire an HR, because I wanted to have that neutral space in my organization where people can very comfortably, if they are not comfortable to talk direct to the boss, they can go and talk to the HR. So I feel like making that decision of hiring a HR when we were about 5 to 6 was a good decision, even though a lot of people advised me against that. And that has helped us to ensure that everybody is their own decision maker, they're leading their own project, and they're also responsible. So we have this policy, like not policy but culture of, it doesn't matter that you're a 22-year-old and this is your first job. We trust you to lead this project, but we also expect responsibility and accountability. So I think that I would say is how we work, and like that's the culture that we have at our organization, that we don't have hierarchies, or we don't treat people just because they are young, or it's their first job. And a lot of people who work at FI, it is their first job, but they lead their own projects, and they know that they have enough freedom to lead their project, but also that they are accountable for it. So it, there's this sense of, okay, I am responsible for this, and I need to, follow up and report back, etc. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also nice to see, I mean, for me and from an organization perspective, that a lot of things are similar. I mean, with organizations like yours. Thank you.
Okay. So Nisha Agarwal's question is around financials and budgets and income and funding, which I've already answered. So I'll skip that question. Vasudha, I'm going to come to your question in a bit. Please share your website. Okay, so there's another question by Swarna, but I don't think this is Swarna, but it's someone else. But I'll still like read that out. Please share your website details. What's your take on women with disabilities? And I think a knowledge sharing accessible platform is very necessary, and we must sustain that, building bridges. Okay, so I will share the website details in a bit. Regarding my my take on women with disabilities, like what kind of, I didn't understand the question. So if the question was like, if as a platform, FI, as I think when I shared the screen, I showed you. So we have a section, we have an entire section dedicated to disability, and talking about mental health and disability. And we have so another thing that, sorry, I should have talked about this before. So we have an editorial policy at the organization, which states that we when we are looking for writers and hiring freelance writers, or when even people submit their writing to us, we have a non-appropriation editorial policy, which means that you cannot appropriate someone else's lived experiences. And we would always give first preference to people from the community to write about their own lived experiences. So if we were to, let's say, write on a topic which is related to disability, it would be written by a woman with disability. And we have we work with a lot of freelance writers, like a huge community of freelance writers. So we have a couple of writers who are associated with us who are women with disabilities. And recently we also actually, so we do like how, what you people do, these kind of sessions, we also do them, but it's internal. We do internal capacity building sessions for our team every third Saturday, not second. And we invite experts and facilitators to, it's more of a like a skill building session so that the team is, you know, learning something new. So we recently invited Abha Khetripal, who is a disability rights activist, and she's also a writer with us, and she conducted a session on disability sensitive writing for the team. So if the question was if we engage with disability, yes. I don't know what to answer on what's my take on women with disabilities. And regarding the last point about accessible platforms, so that's something that actually we have been working on with our tech developer, because at this moment our platform is not accessible for people with visual impairment. But this is something that we are working on with our developer and should actually happen in a couple of months' time, that the platform will become accessible. Okay, there's another comment by another Swarna, which says the person is political is true, more so now, especially for women from all walks of life. So it's just a comment.
I think there's another question by Nisha Agarwal. It says it would be a great idea to profile.
Yeah, I kind of answered it already when I was answering Dr. Swarna's, you know, question about the financials and the sources of income and funding. There's just one question by Vasudha, which I'm yet to answer.
I also had a couple of questions, but you can answer Vasudha's first and then.
Okay. Vasudha, do you actually mind unmuting yourself and like elaborating on your question?
Yes, definitely. Hi, and very congratulations on your amazing platform. I just wanted to understand. So I come from a perspective of working with rural women and developing entrepreneurship in them and leadership skills for their own community. So I just wanted to understand, how is this platform inclusive, and how do you have a for including voices from the grassroots?
Yeah,
Is there a space for them to write and you know, comment, and it's more accessible? So when we talk about feminism, it seems like a very you know, classist kind of an idea, which is more accessible to women in power. So I just want to understand your views on that.
okay, thank you, Vasudha. So I would first like to acknowledge that definitely the you know, the website, and I'm not talking about feminism in general, but like my website and the work that we do is restricted because it's mostly in English and it's on a digital platform, and you know, it comes with its own restrictions of having access to the to a mobile phone or a smartphone and the internet. And yes, it doesn't reach you know, the ground realities that you are talking about. However, since we have started the Hindi website, so earlier when we just had the English website, we saw that our audience was mostly from tier 1 and tier 2 cities, and you know, very again like urban restricted audience. But since we have started the Hindi website, we have seen that we have reached like, we still I wouldn't say that we have reached, you know, every village in the country, but I have seen, like, what we have seen is that we have reached tier 3 cities, and we now because we are writing and publishing in Hindi, we have a lot of, like, we have a couple of writers who from Uttar Pradesh especially. Our team also comes from the Hindi speaking states, so the Hindi team comes from Bihar, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. There are 3 team members in the Hindi team, and all 3 come from these 3 Hindi speaking states. And we now have you know, audience members reading us from smaller towns of these states, and also we have some writers who come from these states who are reporting from the ground. So we have initiated, and it's a slow, you know, it's a very small and slow process, but we have seen difference in you know, when we just had the English website to now that we have a Hindi website, and also, and the kind of audience now that follows us as opposed to like earlier the kind of audience that used to follow us. We have seen, you know, some difference there, and as I said, like it's we are slowly building that kind of audience and reaching those areas that don't always, you know, have this kind of language and discourse. And that's another reason why we have started doing explainers in Hindi, because again, you know, the feminist discourse in general is still very West dominated, I would say. Because like, you know, like for example, intersectional feminism, the term, there isn't, you know, a term in Hindi for that. Or like there's so many terms that we use, heteropatriarchy, how do we translate this into Hindi? So we try to do this by, instead of, you know, just translating these difficult terms that are again like very much in the English language discourse, to explain them by using you know, our articles and videos and social media content.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jacqueline. Just wanted also to understand, is there a scope of an organization like ours who work with rural women, and there's a lot of stories breeding up in the area of grassroots level women leadership. So is there a scope of for us, like the
Yeah.
women in the grassroots, to really document ourselves on your platform?
Yeah. So yeah, actually I should have added this. Oh, sorry. So we also work with NGOs. So that's another way of reaching, you know, places that we ourselves cannot reach. We work with a lot of grassroots NGOs where they either write about the work, the kind of work that they're doing on our website, or their community members, right? And again, a lot of this has been possible because of the Hindi website, because a lot of these people are not, you know, comfortable with English. So earlier we used to also offer editorial assistance where we would ask them to send us like a write-up, and even if it's like not well written, we would someone from the editorial team would like rewrite and, you know, publish it. But now that we because also based in North India in Delhi, we lot of our contacts and, you know, NGO network is in Northern India. So we work with such NGOs, and I would be happy to you know, take up this conversation after this session, like with you.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, so I'll first answer Nandini's question, because that's something that, so Nandini's question is, do you have plans to expand to other languages? Prashna too has been trying to move towards being bilingual in English and Tamil. Do you have any suggestions for making this happen? So ideally, yes, we would want to expand to other languages, but it's just a lot of work and resources, both human and financial. And we are still struggling with bringing the Hindi publication on the same par as the English publication, because there is still like a huge difference in numbers with respect to both the publications. So the ideal, you know, in an ideal scenario, yes, but for the time being, we have paused on that thought, because we, you know, really want to first, you know, bring the Hindi publication at the same quality and quantity before going forward. Now, regarding suggestions for making this happen, I think I'm happy to talk about this later in the, if, you know, Prajna wants to talk about how to do this. But for us, the challenge has been, you know, like even now, the Hindi publication now is 2 years old. Some people write into us and ask, or they would send suggestions like, you should also publish in Hindi. And I'm like, have you seen our website? We have an entire website dedicated to the Hindi publication. So there's a problem of visibility that you know, we have noticed, and it gets difficult when you have a certain kind of audience to get them on the other platform, because somebody who you know is well versed in English may not be well versed in Tamil or Hindi for that matter, and then may not follow. So it's literally like starting a new organization. Like it for we also thought that it would be easier where we would just like, we just have to copy the strategy, you know, because we already have a strategy in place and we have to copy that strategy and, you know, have people. But finding that audience was difficult. For it is still difficult. Like there's a huge gap in numbers. If you go to any of our social media platforms, you will see there's a gap of 10 times. So we are still struggling with finding that right audience in Hindi, or like, you know, making our Hindi publication visible to that audience, because it's not like that audience is not there. The audience is there. It's just that they are not seeing us and we are unable to meet them. So that has been the challenge for us, which is why we paused on our, you know, very enthusiastic plans of starting more languages, because we're like, okay, no, we can't, you know, just keep starting languages and not do justice to them. So we want to do justice to the Hindi platform first before we go on to other languages. There's another question by Aniket. I know I haven't answered this, so I will. What have been some of the challenges and backlash that you have faced? Yeah. So many challenges and backlash. One is that feminism in general, because our name is literally Feminism in India. Feminism has a very bad name, like it has a very bad reputation, and everybody, whenever they hear the word feminism, their first response is, oh, you're a feminazi. So for us to just, you know, carry on with this, like just to keep clarifying to people that no, we are not matriarchal, and we are not demanding the complete opposite of power balance, like, you know, power hierarchies, and we are talking about equality, etc. That in itself is a huge challenge, because it's just extremely exhausting to keep talking about the same thing again and again. And second is that we receive a lot of trolling on social media, and that's because also the kind of work that we do, we don't shy away from criticizing and talking about the politics of the country, and talking about you know, minority rights, especially about Dalit rights and Muslim rights. So these are like whenever we talk about Muslim rights and Dalit rights, we always receive trolling and backlash on the internet. And we criticize the government quite openly. We have multiple, like we publish articles criticizing, you know, something that a politician said, or the prime minister said, or a policy change that they are, you know, yeah, that they have made. So because our work is very much in the public, it we always receive a lot of trolling. There's another question by Sudaruli. What is the motivation that keep you move forward? Thank you, Aniket. So I would be very honest with you that it's not all motivation. It's not all, you know, rainbows and unicorns, because it's very exhausting. And you know, it's also demotivating, especially because of the trolling. We, as I said, we receive immense amount of trolling, especially on Twitter. People call us Islam apologists and Hindu phobic. We have been called Hindu phobic because we talk about Hindu right wing. So, you know, that's the kind of criticism and trolling that we receive. So I would say the motivation honestly comes from the kind of response that we get, and the, you know, from our audience members. Like when people write into us and they tell us like how the website helped them do something, or, you know, made them think differently. So for example, very recently, a reader messaged me in the morning saying that she and a friend of hers, these are two young women, and they are preparing for TISS, Mumbai's women's studies exam. And they told me that they used the website as reference material to prepare for the exam, and they got in, and they got selected for the, you know, for the program. And that really made my day. She messaged me in the morning and I woke up to her message. So it was really nice of her to tell me, you know, that she used the website to study for her entrance exam. And I was like, yes, this is what I wanted to do. So I think like messages like these, or moments like these would be really are really nice. And when you are having a bad day, or when you are like, okay, this is so exhausting. Why am I doing this? I could have had a simpler life, you know, I just have a simple job and not have this huge responsibility all the time. So I think this kind of feedback from our audience members is what keeps me going, at least. So there's this question by Vasugi. Would you feel it would be a good idea in terms of visibility if one were to launch a similar website only in Tamil? I mean, if one could wait for funds to flow in, would it work? I would definitely say that it will work, because even though we are based in Delhi, we actually have a huge number of audience from the south. And whenever, especially whenever we publish anything which is related to either, you know, the Tamil cinema or Malayalam cinema, or the politics in Tamil Nadu, it gets a lot of traction. So I do see that people have, you know, this kind of, like people have want to read this kind of content. So I would definitely say that it will work, and definitely if you have funds, go ahead. I would also happy to like talk about this later or collaborate in whatever way possible. Okay, so there's one more question by Akila. It says how difficult it is for you to keep things real, given that social media and even news don't paint the reality often. I observe that there are very messy facts and more opinions. How do you make sure that you don't add to it? Okay. So on a personal level, I would first say that I make it a point to reduce my social media, you know, involvement, like just my time on social media, because in general for work I have to be active on social media. So for me, then when I switch off work, like in the evenings, and I also try not to look at my personal social media, because it just gets too much. So it's good to have some time off. So that's one. Now from an organizational level, so one thing that we you know, as a publication, first of all, we don't report. So I don't know if people knew that, but just to clarify, we don't report news, because we don't see that, you know, something like, we don't see ourselves as a news reporting platform, but more of a feminist analysis platform. Because for us, you know, we want to have a feminist perspective or opinion or analysis on every cultural, socio-economic or political issue in the country, because we see that, you know, people think that, okay, feminism just women's rights, you know, that's this whole simplification of feminism is meant to only women's issues and women's rights. And we want to bust that myth that no, why can't we have a feminist analysis on the budget, or, you know, on the latest economic policy? Like, why just only talk about sexual harassment or domestic violence? Not saying that those issues are not important, but like, for example, I was with Dr. Swarna at a panel which was on feminist foreign policy. So why not talk about foreign policy from a feminist perspective? I think like those things are very important. And just to answer your question, again, like I would say that it really helps to not get in the social media vicious circle, because it really is a vicious circle. So we do, you know, every time that we report on something, like when we're doing a news analysis on something, that we do check at multiple sources if, you know, this is something, and also not react immediately. That's also something that's very important, because right now the news cycle is so that the more, you know, immediate, or the more quick you are at reacting, you know, it becomes into that whole TRPs and social media clicks. So I think that's one thing that also that we have done, is that we wouldn't immediately, you know, react to something or publish something. Like, we take our time to understand the story, and then you know, publish a analysis piece or an opinion piece on it. Okay. Okay, this one last question I'm going to take, because my throat is now aching. Where do you see Feminism India coming in the few years? So is this Feminism India FII or Feminism in India in general? Can you just clarify, Valerie? You can also unmute yourself.
Yeah, your organization.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I think in the coming few years, like I would definitely want to see at least add one more language on the platform, if not more, because as I said, like in an ideal situation, we do want to be available in multiple languages, but it's just it's not something, you know, it's not very easy to do as it looks easy to work on. So but for me right now, a difficult question is which language to choose, because like if I choose a Bengali, then why not Tamil, or why not Marathi, etc. So I would definitely go towards the language way. And secondly, also speaking from a financial and sustainability point of view, I'm really looking forward to and like I am working towards, and really hoping that we are sustainable, at least to some extent, if not 100%, at least 70% or 80%, because I feel that's really important. And given the political climate and like more rules coming in which are really dampening the philanthropy sector, and like the new FCRA rules, for example, have already, it was so difficult, and now it's just even more difficult. So we also want to focus on the sustainability of the organization.
I think there's a follow-up question from Vasuki, but I know you're you're not feeling up to it. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's not like with the Hindi website, we have realized that you can't just immediately like the whole that okay, we already have a setup in place and we have a system and a strategy and everything, and we can just copy it and we will be able to. That doesn't work. That's what we did with the Hindi, and we have realized that it's not working. So we need to stop thinking in English and then translate that into Hindi, but we have to think originally in Hindi. Okay, maybe a story, like for example, we have done a story on something which may not make sense for the Hindi speaking audience, right? So similarly, like if we do a story on let's say the UP elections, and that story may not make sense to a Tamil speaking audience because it's not relevant to them, like they are not interested in what's happening in Uttar Pradesh elections maybe. So that's what at least now we are doing, is not doing this whole translation and copy paste, and really strategizing anew in Hindi. So as I said, it's like literally starting another organization or like another publication, and not like a okay, let's just put the same strategy and same thinking that we did on this website onto the same and it will work. It doesn't work that way.
Would you like to take more questions, Japleen, or?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Okay, then let me read out Neha's comment. She says, Japleen, thank you so much for opening your heart and sharing your journey and learnings with us. It's an absolute pleasure to see FII grow over the years, and your sharing today has been super inspiring. I think we can all agree with that. We really learned a lot. Thank you so much for being here. It was really fantastic to hear you speak today. And we hope that you'll continue collaborating with Prajna in the future as well. Our next Prajna Gender Talk session is on 12th June. We take a summer break in May.